I didn't expect her to look at me like that. Not my aunt. Not in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, with the smell of motor oil and dust in the air. She had just walked into the shop. Not the kind of place she belonged in. Her shoes were too clean, her hair pulled back in that effortless way that looks careless but isn't. She stood in the doorway for a second longer than necessary, scanning the room like she was bracing for something. Or maybe deciding if she should leave. "Sam," she said finally, her voice low even. "Do you dare?" The words hit harder than they should have. It wasn't what she said. It was the way she didn't blink afterward. The way her mouth barely curved like she might laugh but didn't. I just stood there, wrench in hand, not sure what she meant, not sure I wanted to know. She glanced at the old Chevy I'd been working on and then at me. "Think you can fix it?" she added, as if that first question hadn't hung between us like smoke. I nodded too fast. Yeah, I can." My voice cracked on the second yeah. I hated that. She didn't call me on it, though. She just walked past me, heels clicking against the stained concrete, and rested her hand lightly on the hood of the car. There was something deliberate in that touch, like she was grounding herself. Or maybe testing me. "You've got your father's hands," she said after a beat. Her eyes stayed on the engine, but her fingers tapped the metal softly, out of rhythm. "Steady, careful." He used to say the trick isn't in the tools. It's in patience. I didn't know what to say to that. My dad had been gone 3 years now, and most people avoided bringing him up. I kept my head down, tightened a bolt just to have something to do. "Guess I learned something, then," I muttered. She finally looked at me, and I almost wished she hadn't. There was a lot in that look. Something knowing, maybe pity, maybe pride. Couldn't tell. Her eyes were this clear green, sharp at the edges like she didn't miss much. "Well," she said, straightening up, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve. "Let's see if you live up to it." And just like that, she turned to leave. I should have let her go. Should have just watched her disappear back into the sunlit street like a normal person. But I found myself blurting out, "Why'd you come to me?" She paused in the doorway, didn't turn around right away, just tilted her head like she was deciding how much to say. "Because," she said finally, "you look like someone who won't quit halfway." Then she was gone. I stood there long after, the shop suddenly too quiet, the air thick with things unsaid. Her words weren't even that strange, but they kept circling in my head, brushing against that first question she'd asked. "Do you dare?" That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. The second time she came in, I wasn't ready for her. I'd been elbow-deep in grease, hair sticking to my forehead, when the door creaked open. I didn't hear heels this time, just the soft scuff of flat shoes. She wore jeans and a navy sweater, sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Practical, unshowy. "Hey," I said, too casual, wiping my hands on a rag that wasn't clean enough. "Sam," she replied, like she'd been expecting me to speak first. Her eyes flicked over me. A quick scan, unreadable, before landing on the dismantled carburetor on the workbench. "That mine?" "Yeah, almost done." She walked closer, fingertips grazing a shelf of tools as she passed. She didn't ask about them, didn't fidget, just touched each handle lightly, like counting. When she reached the bench, she stopped and looked down at the pieces. "My brother used to explain this stuff to me," she said, almost to herself. I never really listened. I didn't know if she meant my dad or one of her own brothers, but I didn't ask. Something about her tone warned me not to. "You can still learn," I offered, but it sounded dumb the second it left my mouth. She gave a small, tired laugh, the kind that ends too soon. "Some things you can't catch up on, no matter how late you stay after class." I looked at her hands resting on the edge of the bench. Bare, no rings, knuckles faintly reddened like she'd been cleaning too hard or working outside. I wanted to ask what she did with her days, what wore her down like that, but I kept quiet. Instead, I said, This'll be ready tomorrow. If you want, I can show you how it works. Just, if you're curious. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Maybe. She stayed there a moment longer, eyes on the parts, then on me. I thought she might say something else, but she reached into her bag, pulled out a small thermos, and set it beside me. Coffee, she said simply. You look like you could use it. I blinked. Thanks. She shrugged, like it was nothing, but I noticed the faint pink at the tips of her ears. For a while, we just stood in that cramped space, her watching the carburetor, me pretending to read instructions I didn't need. The air felt dense, humming with things neither of us named. Finally, she stepped back. Tomorrow, then. As she walked to the door, she hesitated, just for a breath. Shoulders lifted, then fell. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. It was late when she came by, later than she should have. The rain had started an hour ago, steady and unrelenting, drumming against the shop's metal roof like impatient fingers. I was alone, finishing up paperwork I didn't care about, when the door opened and she stepped in, damp at the edges. Hair loose this time, curls frizzing just slightly from the weather. You're still here, she said, more observation than question. Guess I don't have anywhere better to be, I replied, regretting how honest that sounded. She didn't tease me for it, didn't even smile. Just closed the door behind her and leaned against it, as though the night outside had pushed her in here. I didn't want to drive home in this, she said. Hope that's not inconvenient. No, I said quickly. Not at all. I went to make space at the workbench, suddenly hyper-aware of the mess. Wrenches scattered, receipts curling in the damp air. She crossed the room slowly, her arms folded across her chest. When she reached me, she unfolded one arm to pick up the thermos she'd left yesterday. You didn't even open it, she said softly. I didn't want to waste it, I muttered. It sounded stupid. She tilted her head, studying me like she couldn't decide if I was being sincere or just awkward. The lights flickered then, briefly, and we both glanced up. When they steadied again, the room felt smaller somehow. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said automatically. Then after a pause, not really. That admission hung there. She seemed surprised she'd said it, lips pressing together like she wanted to take it back. I didn't push. Instead, I leaned against the bench beside her, close but not quite touching. I could smell rain on her sweater, that faint, clean scent that doesn't come from any bottle. Do you want to talk about it? I asked. She gave a tiny, breathless laugh. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Her eyes met mine then, and for a moment she looked raw, not composed, not in control, just tired in a way that made my chest ache. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Then her phone buzzed in her bag, a low, insistent vibration. She didn't move to answer it, just stared at the floor until it stopped. Old habits, she said finally, almost a whisper. Hard to kill. I wanted to ask what she meant, to put my hand over hers and promise something I had no right to promise. My fingers twitched at my side, and I let them. She noticed. I saw her glance at my hand, then back at my face. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. My hand was halfway to hers when she said, You should go now. And I did. But only my body left that room. I hadn't seen her in 3 days. Not since that night in the rain. When she finally walked in again, it wasn't with the same careful confidence as before. She looked stripped down, hair pulled into a loose knot, dark circles beneath her eyes, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands like she was hiding inside them. Car's ready, I said automatically, because I didn't know what else to say. She didn't look at the car. She just stood there in the middle of the shop, unmoving. Sam, she said quietly. My name sounded different on her lips. Not casual, not teasing. Heavy. I set the wrench down slowly. Yeah. Her gaze flicked to the floor, then back to me. What are we doing? The question landed like a weight I'd been pretending not to carry. I swallowed, throat dry. I don't know, I admitted. I thought maybe we were just fixing a car. She huffed out a humorless breath. Is that what this feels like to you? I shook my head before I could think better of it. No, that single word hung there, daring either of us to acknowledge it. She took a small step closer, not enough to touch, just enough to make my pulse stutter. I shouldn't be here, she murmured. Then why are you? I asked, voice low. Her hands tightened around her sleeves, knuckles white beneath the fabric. Because when I'm here, I feel. She stopped, teeth catching her bottom lip, eyes darting away. I waited. I didn't breathe. Finally, she looked at me, and there it was, unguarded, raw. I feel like I'm not disappearing. Something in me cracked at that. I wanted to tell her I'd keep her from disappearing, that she wasn't alone, that I'd do anything. But I couldn't say any of it. The words stuck somewhere between my chest and my mouth, useless. So we just stood there, the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above us, the air heavy with everything we weren't saying. She didn't move, and neither did I. After what felt like an eternity, I took one slow step toward her. She didn't back away. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, the entire world narrowed to that thin stretch of space between us. You don't have to feel like that, I whispered. Her jaw tightened. Don't make promises you can't keep. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, when the shop was empty and sun leaked through the dusty windows in thin, lazy lines. I was hunched over paperwork, half listening to the radio, when she walked in carrying a small, worn envelope. Busy? She asked, voice quiet, as if noise itself might break something fragile. Not really, I said, straightening up. Everything okay? She didn't answer right away, just stood there, holding that envelope like it was heavier than it should be. Finally, she walked over and set it on the workbench between us. I found this cleaning out a drawer, she said. Thought I'd thrown it away years ago. I glanced down. The paper was creased, edges fraying, my father's handwriting on the front. To L. I stopped reading aloud, the rest of the name swallowed in my throat. He wrote to you? I asked carefully. She nodded once. After your mom left, he checked on me, I guess, said I was family. I didn't believe him back then. I thought people always leave eventually. She gave a thin, wry smile. Guess I was right. I didn't know what to say. My dad hadn't talked about her, not like this. Not in a way that suggested care. I traced a finger along the paper without thinking. You remind me of him sometimes, she said suddenly. My head snapped up. What? Her eyes met mine, steady but soft. Not just in how you look. The way you stay. Even when it'd be easier to go. I couldn't answer that. Not without giving away too much. She looked down at the envelope again, then pushed it gently toward me. You should keep it. He'd want you to have it. I hesitated before taking it, feeling the ghost of my father's words pressed into the page. Thank you, I said, and my voice caught on the second syllable. She reached out, almost instinctively, like she was going to touch my arm, then stopped short, fingers curling back into her palm. I didn't mean to stay this long, she murmured. Then why are you still here? I asked, echoing the question I'd asked days ago. This time she didn't look away. Her lips parted as if to answer, but no sound came. Instead, she just stood there, breathing slow, deliberate. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. She came by near closing time. No pretext, no car trouble, no envelope. Just her. I'd been sweeping the floor, half thinking about calling it a night, when the door creaked open and she slipped inside. She looked lighter somehow. Not happy exactly, but unburdened. "Didn't think I'd see you today," I said, leaning on the broom. "I almost didn't come," she replied, and there was no smile, no armor in her tone, just truth. I set the broom aside. "But you did." She nodded and walked further in, stopping near the workbench. She ran her fingers over a stray socket wrench, not really looking at it. "I've been trying to figure out what this is," she said softly. "What we're doing." My chest tightened. We'd been circling this for weeks, never naming it. I waited, afraid to breathe wrong. "I thought I'd tell myself to stop," she continued, still studying the wrench. "That it's wrong or reckless or temporary. But every time I try to stay away." She trailed off and finally lifted her gaze to mine. "I don't want to." Something inside me steadied then, like the ground beneath us had shifted and finally settled. I stepped closer, slow enough for her to move if she wanted. She didn't. "I don't have the right words," I admitted, "and I don't know where this goes. But if you're here, I'm here." She exhaled, a small, shaky sound, and for the first time, she didn't look like she was fighting herself. She just was. I reached out, not for anything grand, just to take the wrench from her hand. My fingers brushed hers, and she let them linger. Not clutching, not pulling, just letting me be there. We stood like that for a long time, the shop dim around us, the world beyond those walls irrelevant. She finally leaned, barely, so her shoulder rested against my chest. I felt the warmth of her through that thin sweater, and I didn't move away. No words came. None were needed. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down, and that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. I think about that night more than I should. Not because of what happened, nothing really did, but because of what it shifted. It's been months now. The shop looks the same. Oil stains on the floor, the old clock that's always 5 minutes fast, the hum of the lights. But I'm not the same. She still comes by. Not every day, not with excuses anymore. Just when she feels like it. Sometimes she brings coffee. Sometimes she brings nothing at all, just herself. We don't talk about what we are. We don't have to. What I've learned. Love doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it's just steady. The someone choosing to show up when they don't have to. The silence that isn't empty. She told me once, weeks after that night, that she used to feel like she was fading, like she'd been living in the edges of her own life. Then she looked at me, really looked, and said, "I don't feel like that anymore." I didn't answer her then. I just reached across the workbench, touched her hand the way I wanted to that first night, and she let me. People ask why I stayed in this small town, why I didn't chase something bigger. I never know how to explain it without giving too much away. But maybe this is enough. Sometimes the biggest thing isn't out there waiting for you. Sometimes it's right here, in the quiet, in the person you didn't see coming, until you did, and you can't imagine not seeing them anymore. So yeah, I dared. And I'm glad I did. What about you? Have you ever stayed when everything told you to run?